I became the general manager of the Washington Commanders after they went 4-13 in their latest season. This is a Madden 24 ultimate rebuild. Obviously, we are going to be doing nothing but simming through this, but ultimately we are going to start with this team and let's take a look at our roster. First up, we have quarterback Sam Howell. Not really sure if we're going to be using him all that long for too much longer. Brian Robinson, obviously Sam Howell's going to be dependent on the draft, but Robinson, great. We also have Terry McLaurin as our number one receiver. He's phenomenal. Jahan Dotson, he is a former first round pick for this team. He's also going to be very good for us to have. And then we also have Logan Thomas, who's a little bit older in the tooth, but no worries. Taking a look at our offensive line, it is just all sorts of kind of really rough shape with the exception of Sam Cosmi. And Andrew Wiley, a little bit older, but also taking a look at the other side of our line for our edge rushers, left end nothing, right end nothing. Then taking a look at our defensive tackles here, Jonathan Allen obviously very good, and we also have Deron Payne, so we have two guys there, but I have a sneaky feeling that we might be moving on from Jonathan Allen sooner rather than later. Taking a look at our linebacking core, it's nothing special, but nothing to be too upset to have. Kendall Fuller, he's also going to be one of our guys, but honestly, one of our main guys that we're going to be looking at here is Emmanuel Forbes Jr. He's going to be one of our top players. Derek Forrest is our free safety, and then Kareem Curl is going to be our strong safety. Taking a look at our first re-signs from these teams, we're going to be looking at Cody Barton, and then we're also going to be re-signing Kendall Fuller and also Kareem Curl. We have officially hired Sean Easton as our head coach, but now taking a look here at some of the draft class, as we can see a quarterback Sherman up at the top, tight end in the top 5. He should potentially be really good. We're going to have to take a look at him. I know tight end is an area of need for us going forward, but still taking a look here at a lot of these players, a handful of ends and a handful of guards. But now taking a look here at the first official trade of the offseason where we have Jonathan Allen and we're sending him to the Raiders along with a 7th round pick for a 2023 and a 2024 5th round pick. Obviously very, very big moves for the club moving forward. Now taking a look here at some of the free agents, we have Robert Hunt, we have another tackle coming in, we have Bryce Huff, we also have Jordan Brooks and Isaiah Simmons all potentially coming in. Let's see how many of them we get. Ultimately, we are only going to get the defenders in Huff, Brooks, and Simmons, which right for us, we definitely need some better linebacking cores, obviously going into the free agency period. But now taking a look at some of the other guys, and then we ultimately got Cameron Dicker, Maurice Hurst, and Kyle Fuller in this second stage of free agency. Now going to our third stage, we have Paris Campbell, we have McGruven, and then we also have Jonah Williams. And then looking to see if we ultimately ended up getting them, we ultimately did. Jonah Williams not going to be one of our starting left tackles, but he's ultimately going to likely be moved over to a guard in this offense, just trying to improve our offensive line any way that we possibly can. Now making our way to the draft, and with the first overall pick, the Chicago Bears select Michael Atkins. With that first overall pick, obviously they decide to go with Justin Fields and get a super athletic tight end. Now with the second overall pick, the Arizona Cardinals select Eric Sherman to be their future guy, ultimately deciding to move on from Kyler Murray. Going to be very, very interesting to say the least. Now moving over to our pick, we skipped a little bit as we now hold the 4th pick. Lance Klein is going to be our official guy moving forward. Sam Howell is no longer going to be the starter. Obviously that hidden dev trade is going to be a massive, massive get for us. Now taking a look here at our second first round pick, the one that we got for Jonathan Allen in the Raiders trade, we're going to select right tackle Chris Nix. Likely going to be a backup for most of the season, but getting a young offensive tackle is going to be absolutely huge for us. But till then, we're going to skip through the remaining part of the draft and get back once all the picks are done. Now, actually, before we get to all of our picks, we're just going to take a look at some of the top players in this one. Dukes to Atlanta, Akins, who was the first overall pick, and just a handful of other players, a free safety, a wide receiver, just some good players all around. But now, officially looking at ours, Klein was our number one draft pick, 75 overall. We know he has that hidden dev trait as well, and Chris Nix, 73 overall, so a little bit lower than what we would have liked. But now taking a look here at the second round in Justin Meadows, he is a 74 overall D tackle. He does not have a dev trait, but he's going to be really, really solid for us, basically coming in to be that Jonathan Allen replacement that we ultimately did. But also taking a look here in that extra second round pick that we did, we got Leslie Moody, who is actually going to be a hidden dev trait. I view him more as an edge rusher than I do a D tackle from got that power rusher dev trait. So we're actually going to move him to defensive end at some point this season. Actually, we're going to do it before the season starts, but he's going to be a big part. So pretty much right there, we are getting a ton of great talent on our defensive line. And then just kind of looking at the rest of the draft class, no one really of note to me didn't really have a great draft pretty much from round 3 onwards, but what I don't even think it was necessarily that great of a draft class. We got Cox, a tight end who's young, might do something. Will Blackman, he is our running back, and then the two outside linebackers and a center. Likely not going to be too much for us in the future. Now officially taking a look here at our depth chart. First taking a look at our offense, we officially have Klein as our starting quarterback. I don't think that was going to be a surprise to really anyone at this point, but we also have obviously Robinson being our starter, but still a lot to like, and Klein really our one guy, but Sam Howell, chances are we are going to be trading him away at some point during the off season, just because ultimately we don't really need him anymore. But you know, Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry, very, very talented, but Robinson and Blackman, he's going to be our backup. Scary Terry right there. Obviously a phenomenal player. Paris Campbell is our third with Jahan Dotson. Our offensive line is still very much going to be a work in progress. Charles Leno Jr. at a 79. He's our second best player on this line, but Jonah Williams, he's going to be sliding over to that left guard spot. And McGowan, he is going to be right down the middle for us, ultimately really just holding up center. Not really anything super special for us here at the moment, but is still a good enough player nonetheless. And obviously Cosme, he's phenomenal, and Wiley, he's gonna kind of hold it down on the right side. And Thomas, he's still going to be our main guy. Again, we can see Nix is also there, gonna be playing backup unless Wiley just absolutely falls completely off the rails, but Cox gonna be our official backup. This is kind of where our offense is going to look this year, but now let's take a look here at the defense. Taking a look to Ron Payne right down the middle as our D tackle 1. Meadows is going to be our D tackle 2, getting above Maurice Hurst, but Moody, we officially switched him to a defensive end. He is going to be our top end guy there, alongside Bryce Huff. Hopefully he can be our edge rusher of the future. That's going to be a pretty solid tandem. And then we also have the Fuller brothers going to be out there, and we also have Emmanuel Ford. Look here at our special teams, nothing really going there, and just taking a look here at our specialists. These are kind of the situations that we're in here at the moment for the rest of the year. Deron Payne, obviously going to be very, very big for this young up-and-coming defense. Now taking a look at a trade that we ultimately made, where we're going to send Sam Howell to the Tennessee Titans for Okwanko. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, but a young tight end from the Tennessee Titans. They get their quarterback. We get a tight end of the future. Now taking a quick look here at the official draft class, 3 quarterbacks all at the top of this draft. So honestly, we gotta really hope that Klein is going to be a really, really good player, just because we have some of these top end quarterbacks at this particular class. We could have used something, and we could have kept Sam Howell. So it's just going to be kind of one of those things where we're ultimately going to be looking there, seeing a handful of ends, a bunch of offensive linemen. So you know what, could potentially find our edge rusher to go alongside Moody if we can. But now, taking a look here at our regular season, we're going to just do sims. I'm only going to show games where we win, and we'll possibly meet back at week 4. If we don't meet back, or if we meet back before week 4, that means ultimately won a game, but we'll go through all the box stats if that so happens. But before we get into any of the weeks, I ultimately used some of the coaching tree to go down and find out what Lance Klein is going to be. He's going to be a superstar, which ultimately makes me feel really better about this pick. So our first win of the season comes against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where we ended up winning 14-9. Honestly, a little shocked that we got not only our first win of the year, but it came in the first game of the season. Granted, Tampa Bay isn't the world's best team, but let's take a look here at some of the stats. Jacoby Brissett didn't have a great day against us, throwing that one interception, but Lance Klein threw the one touchdown, not very high up in the passing yards, and he did have that one sack, so at least our offensive line held up somewhat. Again, first ever game for Klein, so it's not going to be too worrisome there, but still would like to see improvement, especially with that 54% completion. Brian Robinson, 63 yards, one touchdown off of 20 attempts. No rushing pretty much really from anybody else. Klein got 2 rushes for 6 yards. Paris Campbell actually led our team with 45 yards, and Terry McLaurin not having himself a phenomenal game, and Logan Thomas, funny enough, playing backup, actually gets the lone touchdown in the air throughout the game. So it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to ultimately come forward in this. But now taking a little bit of a look over at our defense, Cody Barton had 11 tackles, which led the team. Taking a look at sacks, he also had a sack in that game, and Jermaine Davis, so our linebackers actually having themselves a nice little day. Next game coming up, we ultimately ended up beating the Saints after falling the week prior to. We're not going to take a look at the losses, but we ended up winning 26-20 and had a fairly nice game. 418 total yards of offense gained, as opposed to the Saints with 323. Would like to see the defense slow them up just a little bit more, but overall, pretty much everything offensively, statistically wise, we destroyed them. 23 offensive first downs. Going to be really interesting to see what the stats for our team looks like. Derek Carr threw for a touchdown and 2 interceptions. Same thing with Klein, but Klein threw for 316. Hey, I'm not going to be too worried about him airing the ball out. Only was sacked the one time, so again, not really getting pressured. Brian Robinson Jr. with the 75 rushing yards and the 2 TDs. He was probably the biggest reason ultimately why we got this win here today. Terry McLaurin, 9 catches, 155 yards, still no TDs for him, which is a little bit annoying. We'd love to see those go up, but Paris Campbell obviously helping out with 58. Jahan Dotson down there with 23. Taking a look at the sacks, Charles Leno Jr., our left tackle. Again, this is one of those guys that we're ultimately going to be looking to replace. Couldn't do it last year. Kareem Curl led the team with Jermaine Davis for sacks. Bryce Huff and a handful of others also got tackles for loss. And then taking a look at the sacks, Isaiah Simmons, funny enough, our outside linebacker, getting a sack alongside with Jermaine Davis, and then Bryce Huff and Jordan Brooks. So our linebackers actually doing really, really well, but Curl and Forrest, so our safeties, putting in a handful of work in the interceptions. Now taking a look here at the 4-week mark like we typically do, always going to have a quick look here and just see what's going on. So we lost to the Eagles week 2, that was 17-10. We beat the Saints, but then we ultimately lost to the Panthers 28-17. So not necessarily the best look for us here, but hey, you know what? We still feel like we are a rebuilding team, and there's still a lot to like and a lot to continue to grow on. So ultimately not too upset with these results, and just looking at this team 2-2 after 4 games, we're not going to be upset. But now let's go over and take a look at the stats. Lance Klein, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 59% completion. Those are really, really rough numbers to start out the season. But hey, he's a rookie. He's only played 4 games. Peyton Manning, to open up his career, had I think like 28 interceptions on the year. I could be completely wrong on that number, but still, very early days. Brian Robinson, the 256 yards with the 5 TDs. Right now, he is pretty much the offense at the moment, only pretty much being the only guy to actually get points. Peterson also had one, but taking a look at our receiving, 248 yards, just a little shy under that 250 mark for Terry McLaurin, but Paris Campbell with just shy under 200, so he's actually been performing really well for us. John Dotson also getting the touchdown, so the only two. I'm looking at our sack department, Charles Leno Jr. with 2, and unfortunately our top end guard Cosme with the 1 sack as well, so never like to see that. Definitely we want our 86 overall guard to keep our guy protected, but 3 sacks in 4 games, I can't really complain about that. Those are fairly good numbers, unlike what Washington was doing last year. Taking a look at the defense, Cody Barton leads the team with 38 tackles. Leslie Moody leads the team in tackle for losses. No sacks on the year yet so far from what we see. A little bit unfortunate. We'd really hope that he would at least have one. Again, playing D tackle most of his college career, now playing that defensive end spot. I think it's probably going to be a little bit of an adjustment period. And you know what? No worries. Isaiah Simmons, Davis, and Barton all lead the team in sacks, all from our linebacker spot. That is never a good sign when we play a 4-3 and our linebackers aren't particularly the guys who should be getting the sacks. And Jordan Davis also leads the team in interceptions, with Davis, Curl, and Forrest also having those as well. So, hey, our linebackers playing really, really good. Not going to complain about it, but we're definitely going to need to see this team step up here in the moment. Cameron Dicker, so far, has looked absolutely perfect. So now that we are here at trade deadline day, we have made a trade where we're sending Kendall Fuller to the Cleveland Browns for Emerson Jr., Luke Hunt, and their 2024 or 2025 fourth round pick. Ultimately, we get younger at corner. Emerson happens to just be a superstar player, 82, 23 years old, but let's take a look at these two players. First, taking a look at Martin Emerson, 6'2", 200 pounds, 23 years old, already 2 years in the league, the former third-round pick, going to be an absolute monster. And then now looking at Luke Hunt, the rookie, 6'2", 228 pounds at 23, so a little bit older, but he has that hidden dev trait, going to be a great number 3. Now taking a look here at the last 4 weeks now that we were at trade deadline, only getting the possible win at the very end, and that's going to be up against the Giants. So now we're ultimately going to be taking a look here at the Giants, but not great, losing to the Falcons. We had a lot of close games there, but 28-17 against the Giants, getting back to our winning ways the first time since I believe week 4. Absolutely. Well, I guess we didn't dominate them, but we had 393 yards to their 331. Taking a look at both of the quarterbacks, it's Lance Klein versus Christian Nielsen, so another rookie. I'm not sure where he was in the draft class, potentially going to have to look at that, but Klein absolutely demolished him pretty much in everything with the exception of that one turnover, and Nelson got sacked 4 times, so big day for our defensive line. Klein, but Brian Robinson, the 76 rushing yards, that appears to really kind of be where his sweet number is, but also getting those 2 touchdowns. Dude has been money. Terry McLaurin just shy of that 150-yard game with the 1 touchdown, so finally we're seeing him get into the end zone. Luke Hunt in his first game with us, he has 3 catches for 37 yards, so maybe not the start that we would have hoped for, but he's playing number 3 for us. Unfortunately, Paris Campbell had to move down. Jonah Williams giving up a sack from his left guard spot. Now taking a look at Cody Barton with the 10 tackles on the day, having himself a fairly good one. Justin Meadows, our rookie D tackle, with 2 tackles for loss. Now taking a look at this, Leslie Moody finally starting to put up some numbers in the sack department. Justin Meadows also getting one. Deron Payne with another one there. So just a phenomenal day for our D-line. No interceptions on the day, not to worry, but just taking a look to see if we had any defensive touchdowns. No, we did not. So let's take a look at our next win. Taking a look at this, pardon me, it's not actually our next win. It's actually going to be the stats after the 8 full weeks. So taking a look at Klein, definitely improved over these last 4 weeks, going 7 for 7 in touchdowns to interceptions, but definitely still need to see him pick it up. He's pretty much at a sack per game pace here at the moment, only getting 1 per game, which isn't necessarily too bad. I'd like to see those numbers still stay very low, but you know what? Overall, not too terribly bad. Could be better, could be worse. Now taking a look at Robinson, 537 yards, but most crucially, the 9 rushing touchdowns. And Will Blackman has his first official rushing touchdown. But when you have a guy like Robinson playing like he is, you're not going to take the ball away from him. Terry McLaurin, 623 receiving yards, the 1 touchdown. Paris Campbell, actually, I think we might have ultimately hurt Campbell a little bit, bringing in Hunt, but ultimately worked out. Hunt, we definitely want to see him grow and develop. Obviously, all those yards aren't with us. Some of those are with Cleveland, but yeah, so far so good. Taking a look at our sacks, Charles Leno Jr. with 3, and Sam Cosmi, who we're looking to try to re-sign with those 2, still very low numbers. So you know what, I can't be too terribly upset. Connor McGovern, he's with those 0 sacks on the season, so our center definitely playing really, really well here. Now we're going to be taking a look here at our defensive stats. Cody Barton leads the team with 67, very far in the lead, 67 over Jermaine Davis with the 52. Justin Meadows leading the team in tackles for loss with Moody there at number 2. Moody actually leading the team with 3 total sacks with Deron Payne at 2. And Bryce Huff, the guy that we brought in to kind of be our number 1 edge rusher, only with the 1.5. So definitely a little bit upset with the performance there, and the interceptions still kind of around the same. Martin Emerson getting the 1 interception for Cleveland. But now taking a look at our next game, we ended up beating the Chicago Bears 42-30, so we're up to 2 games in a row now, and the Bears actually outgained us on the offensive total and the rushing, but we outperformed them in the passing yard game. Remember, they have that young rookie tight end that they selected first overall. But taking a look here at our passing numbers, Justin Fields didn't really have himself a day, only the 1 for 2, but we had 3 for 2, so Klein, able to get some yards out there, starting to get those touchdown numbers up. He's still kind of throwing a handful of interceptions, was sacked twice, but his best day overall, that I believe in the win column with 73% completion. Brian Robinson going up against a really tough run team in the Chicago Bears, 66 rushing yards. Terry McLaurin still doing fairly good there, 105 receiving yards. Luke Hunt gets 71 and 1 touchdown, so wow, a good day for him. Jahan Dotson with 57 and 2 TDs. Money all around for these guys. Taking a look at the sacks, both coming against Charles Leno Jr., so he had a tough day, likely going up against Montez Sweat, and just ultimately allowing the Bears to get to our quarterback once or twice. We're still not going to be too upset with just those numbers, but taking a look at the tackles for loss, pretty much split evenly. Isaiah Simmons, our linebacker, he's actually been fairly good at getting after the passer. So we have a little bit of a dev trait boost where Emmanuel Forbes Jr. is now up to a superstar after 2 really good weeks of back-to-back play, and that is just nothing but good. Having 2 superstar corners is awesome. Also, we have to talk about finally re-signing Sammy Cosmi, who took a few weeks of negotiation, but eventually we got him to sign long-term 5-year deal. Massive for us moving forward. And now taking a look at our next game, which is up against the Cleveland Browns, and we ultimately won, and we absolutely dominated on offense. This was the game where Emmanuel Forbes ultimately got that dev trait boost, and Lance Klein goes out there, throws a touchdown and 1 interception, but 341 yards. Deshaun Watson with the 2 interceptions in that game. He was sacked 3 times. Again, you're going up against a very formidable opponent in their defensive line. 75% completion. That is a very, very solid number for Klein. Really like to see that improvement. Still want to see him take care of the football a little bit more, but honestly, you're not going to complain overly too much about this situation here at the moment, but still really happy. Brian Robinson, not one of his best games out there, only the 51 yards on 21 attempts, the one touchdown. So again, he's still getting into the end zone. Jahan Dotson with one of his best games of the season, 98 yards and a touchdown, still moving down. Luke Hunt, 48. This is a guy that we just traded for Cleveland, so a little bit of a revenge game. Didn't have too much there. And Charles Leno Jr., Wiley, and McGruven, player that we just talked about recently, having no sacks on the season, finally gives up the one. Jermaine Davis, he has ultimately had a nice game. Deron Payne, he gets a sack. Don't feel like we've talked about him a ton this year, but Curl and Fuller both getting the interceptions on the day, and no defensive touchdowns from what it appears. But now taking a look at the game against the Steelers, again, a little bit of a closer game, 21-10, but offense was fairly consistent through both teams. Klein threw the 2 touchdowns and the 1 interception. Kenny Pickett really didn't have much of a game. Klein got sacked 6 times this game, so going up against TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, both likely getting after him, still getting those 248 yards. The 62% completion, a little bit down from the week prior to, but still a decent number. Brian Robinson, again, back-to-back weeks of tough opponents. Only the 50 yards, but another touchdown there. Not going to be upset. Terry McLaurin, the 84 yards and a touchdown, and Dotson 62 and 1. And look at that, Luke Hunt with 61 yards. No TD yet for him with us, but still performing pretty good as our number 3. I think we have a really good 3-man tandem. Wiley giving up the 3 sacks, and then just likely going to be Klein ultimately getting sacked on his own volition. But now taking a look here at our defense, but it's really tough to see Wiley give up those. Leslie Moody with the 2 sacks, but also leading the team in tackles with 7, having himself a monster day. Always really like to see those as we continue on. Also, Deron Payne, back-to-back weeks getting sacks for him, so good to see our interior getting after it. No interceptions. Now taking a look again against the Eagles. We're on a nice little win streak here at the moment. Ended up beating the Eagles, but taking a look at Klein, having the better day, I would say, against the former quarterback, or the quarterback of the Eagles, Jalen Hurts. 2 TDs, only the 179 passing yards, so a little bit of a slower day. Brian Robinson getting back to a little bit more of his normal. No TDs on the day, which is unfortunate. Okonkwo, he has his big day, 66 and a TD. Hunt, 58, but Terry McLaurin not having a phenomenal day. It must have just been really tough in this passing game. Taking a look at the sacks, none taken there. Jermaine Davis having himself a good day. Isaiah Simmons again with a sack, and Forbes and Meadow both connecting with one, and Kyle Fuller ultimately getting that interception. Another win, this time beating the Arizona Cardinals 24-21, and Lance Klein with 230 passing yards, 2 TDs. But if you remember, at the early stages of the draft, Sherman was the 2nd overall pick and the first quarterback taken in the draft, and he did not have himself a great day. Throw for only 192 yards, an interception. You know, he was fairly good in the completion department, but Klein was still better. No sacks, the 2 DDs, more yards, better completion percentage, almost around the same number of passes, but yards per pass, or just ultimately better. Klein, we are looking at that going, we are happy that we took him, and that was our quarterback of the future. Brian Robinson Jr., 61 yards, a TD, so it's still a fairly good game. Not those 100 yards, but Luke Hunt, 7 catches, 73 yards. Terry McLaurin with 5 and 72, so both fairly good. Okonkwo with the 2 TDs and 26 yards, so he's putting up some decent numbers for us here. And honestly, this trade has only gotten better and better for us as time goes on. Cosme, we know there was no sacks on the particular day, so that's going to work out well. Cody Barton, Bryce Huff finally getting a sack, Isaiah Simmons, and a pair of players splitting it. So some decent little work there. And Forbes with another interception on the season. And finally, our last game of the season, we ultimately beat our division rivals, the Dallas Cowboys, 17-10. They outgained us in the yards, 382 to 352. But Lance Klein throwing less yards than Dak Prescott, but throwing the one touchdown, no interceptions to Dak Prescott's no touchdowns and no interceptions. Prescott was sacked twice, while Klein was only sacked the once. So you know what? We're not going to be too upset with that. And taking a look at Robinson, the 71 rushing yards for the 1 TD. Just been a phenomenal player for us. Jahan Dotson with 107, the 1 touchdown. Cosme and Andrew Wiley ultimately giving up the sack, but taking a look at our guys, Cody Barton led the team in tackles, and Justin Meadows, he gets himself a sack with Barton and Forbes also getting the sack.
So as we get to the end of the year, one thing that I honestly didn't really pay attention to enough that maybe that I should have was ultimately the playoff picture. And as you can see here, we made the playoffs as the 7th seed, and we are going to be going up against the Atlanta Falcons. So this is without a doubt a little bit of a surprise that I certainly didn't see coming, but you know what? We're in the playoffs. We were supposed to be a rebuilding team. Likely, I thought we were going to be a top 5 team. Hell of a surprise, to say the least. Probably one that I should have paid a little bit more attention to, but nonetheless, our season isn't done. But before we get to the playoff game, let us go through the actual stats throughout this regular season, just so that we can get a fair idea. And Lance Klein, almost 4,000 yards, 21 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions, was sacked 25 times, so he definitely took a lot more sacks in the second half of the year. But ultimately, I look at this and I go, that is all phenomenal numbers. I am A-okay with what I see from this young man so far on this team. Could not be happier with the progress. Definitely a little bit slower, but overall fairly good. Brian Robinson, the 305 carries. Oh my God, he was an absolute bell cow. Just a shy over 1,000 yards, almost 17 rushing touchdowns, almost a touchdown per game pace with 16. But ultimately, he was pretty much our lone run game, with the exception of Klein, who also added 200 more yards. Scary Terry with 1,179 yards. Only the 2 TDs. Would like to see him get into the end zone a little bit more often. Jahan Dotson with 816 and 8. He was definitely the guy that just ultimately found the end zone. Luke Hunt with 806 yards, the 2 TDs. And just a lot of excellent stuff. Paris Campbell pretty much took a complete step backwards once we got Hunt. I do kind of feel a little bit bad, but the tight end that we traded for with the Titans, I'm not really going to try to pronounce that name all too often, but he also had a good year. Taking a look at our offensive line, Charles Leonard Jr. and Wiley, both did their thing, and Cosme, who we gave a big contract to, only allowing the 2 sacks, so ultimately not too shabby whatsoever. Cody Barton, 128 tackles, leading the team. Closest was Davis with 109, so just vastly different. Taking a look at our tackles for loss, Deron Payne with 18, just having a monster second half, and Leslie Moody, our second round rookie draft pick, who was ultimately a D tackle, then we switched to end, leads our team with 7. Deron Payne. Isaiah Simmons from the outside linebacker spot getting 5. Maybe, just maybe, we might consider him as an edge rusher going forward, because Bryce Huff, the guy that we brought in to be our number 1 edge rusher, with only 3.5, not necessarily where we'd like to be. Justin Meadows, our other second round rookie defensive tackle, had 3 on the year. A handful of guys got 2. Emmanuel Forbes, who we saw also get that dev trait boost earlier in the year, so he is now a superstar. So our secondary is starting to come together, and this is ultimately going to make this offseason just a little bit trickier, in my opinion, moving forward. Had a couple of forced fumbles, only the 3. Taking a look at the fumble recoveries, but then also taking a look at the TDs. That is Emmanuel Forbes, but we are now going to take a look at Cameron Dicker, having himself a phenomenal year at extra points, but missing a handful, only 72%, so we'll need to see that get better.
us in our lone playoff game. We could not get the victory. We fell 28 to 27. Taking a look at the stats inside the game, and Klein, you know what? He played half decent with 300 passing yards, the one touchdown, the two interceptions, but unfortunately, Desmond Ritter just outperformed him in terms of the getting the touchdowns done and not turning the ball over as much. Brian Robinson, was kind of that workhorse, running back like we've seen so much in Okonkwo. 132 receiving yards, Jahan Dotson, but unfortunately, Scary Terry just didn't get going in this particular game. And then just looking at the sacks, just Brian Robinson also getting the sack there, but Jermaine Davis with the 6 total tackles. And taking a look here at the sacks, Isaiah Simmons and Justin Meadows getting that one, but Emmanuel Forbes getting that. But taking a look here at the official playoff tree, I'm not going to talk about the games. I'm just going to kind of leave them up here on the screen so that you can see your viewing pleasure. That was the wild card. Now this is the divisional, and this is now the championship. So it looks like the Eagles, Cowboys, and Chiefs and the Bills are going to be going there. And after the particular week, we are now seeing that it's the Cowboys taking on the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, which is going to be a big time matchup. Let's see if the Kansas City Chiefs can get another Super Bowl under Patrick Mahomes, and if the Cowboys can stop their curse. But now taking a look here at the Pro Bowl, kind of looking through, that might look like it's Brian Robinson, but it's actually Bijan with the Falcons. Still looking to see if we have any particular guy. Brandon Ayuk. Can we get Jahan Dotson? No, unfortunately, we can't, or pardon me, but we do get Okonkwo, which is very, very good to see. So we actually get a Pro Bowl tight end on the first year he's ever on our team. So that just shows how good that move was for him, 1-for-1 with Will Levis. But moving through, no offensive line that it looks like here at the moment. I don't really necessarily blame anyone. Our offensive line wasn't amazing, but it wasn't terrible. Deron Payne ultimately going to go there, but Jonathan Allen, who we ultimately traded away this offseason to the Raiders, also getting there. I'm just checking through to see if anyone that I potentially missed, but still scrolling down and not really finding anyone else. I thought we definitely should have had at least one, maybe two Pro Bowl corners. Emmanuel Forbes, as we go down, definitely not able to sneak in, and just continuing to look on no one else for the Pro Bowl. So at the end of the year, the Kansas City Chiefs win the Super Bowl and ultimately get their fourth. Joe Burrow was the MVP, Kyle Shanahan the coach of the year. Offensive player of the year was Brandon Ayuk. Max Crosby was defensive player of the year. Wide receiver Travis Stewart for the Titans, he was the offensive player of the year, and surprisingly, Moody, our defensive end, not winning defensive rookie of the year. It's actually outside linebacker Aaron Clifford, but Patrick Mahomes ultimately getting Super Bowl MVP. That's definitely something that we are going to have to look at here as we get to the end of the season, just to hopefully see. But taking a look at last year's, that's what that was, but unfortunately not getting it any of the rookies of the year. But that is ultimately going to do it for this episode, guys. Thank you all very much for hanging. I know it's going to be a little bit of a longer episode here, but please make sure to like and subscribe and check back daily for more Madden content. I'm going to try to get these uploaded at least once every single day, but till then, I will see you guys all very soon.